So there was a little break there in chapter 7, so just picking that up again. The impersonality of the ego. While there is a belief in a singular me or my, it seems as though one is sacrificing by letting go of the ego mind. It is viewed as a sacrifice because it is thought to be something unique and precious, because it is personal. It is helpful to realize that the ego is impersonal. It is not unique at all. Everybody's innate ego operates about the same as that of everybody else. Unless modified by spiritual evolution, all ego selves are self-serving, egotistical, vain, misinformed, and committed to endless gain in all its customary forms, such as moralistic, superiority, possessions, fame, wealth, adulation, and control. Because of its positionality, everybody's ego results in guilt, shame, greed, pride, anger, rage, envy, jealousy, hatred, etc. Because the ego is constructed of positionalities, it has no option to be anything else than what it is. It therefore becomes an inescapable source of endless suffering and loss. Above all else, it fears the future and the spectre of death itself, which is intrinsic to the ego structure. What the ego clings to most in its conviction of its own existence as an independent reality. For a while, the ego even resorts to seeking enlightenment as a secret means of securing its survival unto eternity. By this sleight of hand, the spiritual ego emerges in a desperate but now sophisticated form of survival. Our fantasies about our reality are dear to us, and we are reluctant to relinquish them. The process requires both courage and faith. To let go of the known for the unknown requires great commitment, willingness, and devotion to surrendering one's faith to God. Causality. Certain realizations bring about major leaps in consciousness and are therefore worth repeating, because they are often comprehended primarily through the process of familiarity rather than sequential linear logic. Progress is facilitated by letting go of certain limiting but strongly held belief systems that themselves are positionalities. In reality, nothing is causing anything else. Everything is the expression of its own essence and is self-existent. Its appearance is dependent on everything else in the universe and the point of view from which it is observed. Everything is actually self-existence in its reality, because everything is part of all that is, and has no individual parts, separateness, or interdependent existence. Inasmuch as it is not separate from everything else, its existence as it requires no external cause. That which appears as manifest arises directly out of the unmanifest by the process of creation. It does not arise as an effect of something else. There is no else, and only in duality does it seem to require an explanation, such as causality, to explain what appear to be separate events. Actually, there are no separate events, no separate things, and no happenings to be explained. The Newtonian paradigm of causality, which is the main limitation of the calibrated level of the 400s, postulates a mysterious process called causality. If we watch and closely examine sequences of events, we note that they are actually sequences of appearances. They are created by an arbitrary selection of a beginning and an end in time or space. Causality is an abstract concept, and like all abstractions, has no intrinsic reality. It is a linguistic concept useful in the physical world of ordinary activity. We can only see conditions. An obvious example is that one can only start from where you are. We could say that the prerequisites for events are not causes, but certain necessary conditions. Even intellectual humility requires the relinquishment of hypothetical constructs that have only heuristic value as linguistic explanations. This is clear from the child's question, why does the flower turn to face the sun? Heliotropism is the explanation given, which fulfills the question, which is really a non-answer. A rhetorical question can only produce a rhetorical answer. Because the mind that operates out of the paradigm of Newtonian causality has no means of discerning truth from falsehood, the scientific mind substitutes skepticism or even cynicism in an attempt to defend itself from being misled. All kinds of devices are utilized to overcome this limitation, including elaborate statistics that are subcategorized under the title of scientific method. This results in so-called double-blind experiments or dependence on replicability of results, implying statistical and mathematical criteria that become self-reifying with causality as a purported operative mechanism. From nonlinear dynamics, however, we observe that it is out of sameness that difference arises, or all of creation would be at a standstill. It is out of 100 million generations of black beetles that a white beetle suddenly emerges. The blocks of skepticism is in the hypothetical arguments are all delays to spiritual progress. Faith implies a voluntary suspension of disbelief, which supports the humility that underlies all spiritual progress. Conviction occurs later, since truth is self-revealing, self-evident, and comes about as an effortless self-fulfilling presentation. If there is no causality, and nothing is causing anything else, then how do we bring about desired goals or changes? In actuality, there is the setting up of necessary conditions that, by historical observation, have always been present. What is desired is the witnessing of a sequence, then causality is implied as operating through that sequence. When observed closely, it will be realized that sequence itself, like heliotropism, is merely an intellectual construct. There is neither a sequence nor a happening, but instead a successive points of observation on an imaginary timescale. At best, one could see that they obscure what happens to be a change of appearance. To let go of assuming an arbitrary artificial point of observation in time, the illusion of change disappears. The assumption of a this as compared to a that is an artifact of duality and an arbitrary point of observation. In reality, there is no this or that, no here or there, no now or then. These are only the mechanisms of mentation, just as locality cannot be described without a basic point of reference. In reality, there is no this to become a that, nor is there either time or distance other than the illusion created by the arbitrary selection of a point of reference. The arbitrarily selected point of reference, locality, is not possible or describable. Therefore, reality is spoken of as non-local, beyond space and time. It is not describable in those terms that are only categories of thought and abstractions of the reasoning process. These are useful, however, to the levels of consciousness that calibrate primarily in the 400s. At 500, there is a major paradigm jump, so that what was real now seems unreal, and what is unreal now seems to become the real. Each level of awareness has its own understanding of truth and clarity, comes from understanding this quality of levels of consciousness. If causality has no reality and mechanistic determination, is not the explanation of what we observe, what other explanation could be substituted in the interim until a greater awareness reveals itself? The mind is life's conundrum, so we can answer its questions with the temporary but obviously satisfactory explanation of creation. If the unmanifest becomes manifest through continuous creation, then no other intellectual devices or premises are required as attempts to explain the obvious. We could say that everything is created to be self-evolving because that is intrinsic to its existence and the nature of creation itself. This explanation then imputes another duality, that of created versus creator. This can be transcended easily by seeing the obvious that creation and creator are identical. In non-duality, there is no separation between a creator and that which is created. As limitations are released, the universe reveals itself to not be different from divinity. As the self is realized, the divinity of all creation in all its expression goes forth with shining power and absoluteness. It is self-effulgent, self-revealing, self-identical and complete in total unity and oneness. The Absolute is exactly that. The infinite presence within all that exists is beyond all time and space, forever complete, perfect and whole. All points of observation disappear, and there is the omnipresence of that which knows all by the fact that it is all. As reality stands forth in its stunning self-evidence and infinite peace, it appears that the block to realization was the mind itself, which is not different from the ego. They are one and the same. The state of awareness is the level of no-mindedness, which is not the same as void or nothingness. Those terms refer to form. The ultimate is the realm of non-form, non-limitation, and non-locality, and therefore of the ever-presence of the totality of the all. There is only existence. Existence requires no cause, and to think as much is to create a fallacy of logic. By existence, we mean discernible through observation, and it imputes a hypothetical change of conditions from non-existent to existent. However, that which is always was in its completeness beyond all time. Looking for a primary cause is an artifact of mentation that arises along with the concepts of time and space. Beyond time and space, there are no events, no beginnings, and no endings, which are beyond the categories of human thought or reason. And there we are. That's the end of chapter 7 of this wonderful book, The Eye of the Eye. I hope to put chapter 8 on very soon. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. See you soon. Much love.